To Swift Radio.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
So now that we have our budget 2026 and this is 13 billion deficit budget, what do you think about that?
I think it's a very poorly constructed budget that will impact senior citizens, hardworking families, small businesses, and does very little for public safety in terms of both extortion, but also just regular other crimes that are happening in our communities.
And I understand that you have different perspective about this budget, but people want to know your plan. What is conservative plan about the budget? Not just the criticism. What exactly would you do?
Well, I think we have to remember that this has been building up for the last decade under the NDP. So certainly the BC Conservatives can't solve everything in the first budget once we become government. But there's some fundamental things that this government is doing that has put them in a situation it's going to be very hard to get out of. So they're collecting more tax revenue than we've ever seen before, yet they're running higher deficits than we've ever seen before. And their solution is to actually add more taxes, not to get government out of the way, to allow small businesses to thrive and hire more people, to get projects going, to have our forest sector actually be working again and not closing mills down. So there's a lot of areas that the government could actually be taking meaningful action to actually get our economy growing while actually making sure that they're not spending money unnecessarily and over budget. The Langley to Surrey to Langley SkyTrain is a good example of it. It's $2 billion over budget and years behind schedule. That extra $2 billion could build a lot of schools in Surrey and Langley.
So, talking about the taxes, if you want to raise taxes, let's say if conservative they are in, in the power. So, where will you cut spending? Will you reduce funding for healthcare or education or housing? What's your take on that?
Well, this is why it gets almost ridiculous with the NDP. They're now telling people that we would literally close hospitals. And the last I checked, the only people closing emergency rooms, even down in Delta and in Maple Ridge, is the NDP. And so we're not wanting to close hospitals or schools or anything of that sort. What we're saying is you have to spend money efficiently and effectively. You have to be very tight fiscal managers. And then you also have to be getting out of the way to make sure that the private sector economy grows. The Premier has finally acknowledged that they grew the public sector way too big, but he's talking as if he had nothing to do with it. It was directly under his watch that the public sector grew as much as it has. And now they're scrambling, saying that they're going to cut 15,000 government jobs, but they won't tell us where they're cutting them. They won't tell us what year they're cutting them in. So I actually, frankly, don't believe that the Premier will actually follow through with it.
And also, people would like to know what is your timeline to reduce the deficit? Because the budget NDP has presented is 13 billion deficit. So, what's your plan on that deficit?
Well, it will take years, and it will take years of strong oversight in terms of the spending and in terms of continually growing the economy year over year over year, none of which we have seen from the NDP. And so, although they say next year the deficit will drop to $10 billion, I don't believe that either, because this year's deficit, this time last year, they told us it was going to be $10 billion, and now it's almost 13 and a half. And so, they've not been able to remotely try to bring the deficit down. And in fact, it keeps going the other way every single year under David Eby's watch. It's been a record deficit. And so these are the types of things that we would need to take literally years over. I can't sit and pretend that we could get it solved overnight, but there is a pathway to do that by effectively reining in extra spending. If you did a 2% spending cut across government, not dramatic cuts, not closing hospitals, but just finding those 2% of efficiencies, that would save $2 billion right there, year after year after year. Again, getting the economy going so we actually have revenues coming into government because people are gainfully employed and not going to a food bank, but going to a job that day. That will help the economy immensely. And so it's those types of actions we need to take, and the BC Conservatives would ensure that happens.
Mr. Melbar, what is one major step you would take to boost the economy? We've talked about the job cuts, 15,000 jobs, been cut. And what do you think, should have done?
Well, there's no doubt that we have to look at the public service and make sure that people are in the right jobs, that we're not having a backlog in certain permitting areas, while other areas they don't have files to work on. So shifting around staff resources first off to make sure that government's working efficiently is important, but also making sure that we get rid of the multiple layers of confusing government regulation and rules that have been added on year over year that really have been a drag to industry and to small business. And then you look at this budget. You have store owners that have to hire security guards now because this government has let lawlessness happen on our streets. And now they're going to actually charge that store owner provincial sales tax on the cost of the security guard. And that's going to pull another $550 million out of small businesses. And so at a time when businesses are desperate for help, both financially, but also on the security side, this government is deciding to basically attack them on both fronts. It simply doesn't make any sense.
And Mr. Malabar, does your party want to reject this budget?
Absolutely. There's obviously, we're not rejecting it because we don't want to see spending on healthcare, and we're not rejecting it because we don't want to see spending on schools or anything like that. But ultimately, in its sum total, this is not a good budget. It very much attacks seniors, working families, and small businesses. We don't agree with that, and we will certainly be opposing this budget.
And in the end, what do you have to say to the public, to our listeners who are listening to you at this moment, about your promises, about your plans in future?
Well, I think they should demand better out of anyone that's in government and expect better. This government will not follow through on any of their promises. I remember everyone was supposed to have a $500 grocery rebate in the election. Kindergarten to grade 3 classes were supposed to have teaching assistants. None of that has happened under David Eby. Instead, our schools are declining even more, and we now have new taxes. Those same people that should have benefited from that grocery rebate are now actually going to be taxed an extra $1 billion in income taxes in this budget. So I think the governments need to be judged, and they should actually be transparent and forthright to the public, and that's certainly my commitment. And I know that's a commitment by every BC Conservative, that we would expect and welcome that type of scrutiny and transparency and accountability.
Well, thank you, Mr. Malabar. We really appreciate that you took some time out for this conversation. Well, looking